Hello everyone, and welcome back to another epic installment of the Avarignian Chronicle. But before we begin, a word from our sponsor, Stone Clean Soap. Made using traditional methods in master boilers with ingredients from around the world, the catalog offered by Stone Clean Soap is wide and varied. Be it the calming, flowery tones of the Jasmine Tea Bar, or the uplifting lavender scent of the Peace on Earth Beauty Bar, each one of these Rainforest Alliance certified soaps has its high-quality ingredients proudly listed for all to see. Also, if you use the code Salamander at checkout, you'll get 10% off, and a portion of each purchase will go directly towards helping the channel. Once again, many thanks to today's sponsor, Stone Clean Soap, at stonecleansoap.com. Now, on to the video. As Admiral Longway touched down on a world which was completely foreign to him, beyond that beach the continent knew him not until months had passed. Indeed, his stay at Aviero Beach was ultimately brief, trading with locals and ultimately Rex Severian VI for months' worth of food and supplies in exchange for 24 beads of jade, a single cannon, and a copy of the Sheng Jing, which would come to be known in the West by its Latin name, the Bible. He wrote of the Avarignians in his exploratory journal, "They are a stout and affable people, tanned by the sun and sporting thick beards, though their nobility are sometimes clean-shaven. They were excited to help us, and we dazzled their primitive minds. Glorious Poyang could conquer this place and make slaves of them in a week." After this, Longway went on his Mediterranean voyage, visiting the nations of Zamor, Rome, and Sirtia, though Phrygia turned them away, firing upon their ships as soon as they recognized them as followers of the Shugauja. He wrote of this experience, "Those Phrygians, who squat upon the land of the apostles, build up walls against our coming. Never mind this. The Holy Spirit will guide us to Golgotha upon wings of fire." He then made his return journey, blinking out of the West's point of view, utterly alien and incomprehensible as when he arrived. He would go on to serve the Empire of Poyang in their efforts to colonize the Indian Ocean, and would never return to the West. Whatsoever was occurring in the East was once again lost to the West, and so things proceeded as normal as they could. However, for the purposes of this chronicle, we must project backwards what we now know, so such events occurring in the East will be catalogued for their sheer magnitude alone. As for the foreign gifts received by Rex Severian VI, he saved the cannon, and kept it mounted upon the walls at Segovia, only ever fired once on the beach to demonstrate its function. During this time, Avarignia fostered good relations with Triballia, while such relations soured with Avarignia, Zamor, and Phrygia, which became noted rivals of the kingdom. In April of 1453, Imperator Iacchus Andonid of Rome extended an offer of alliance to Avarignia, seeing as the two had once been on good terms long ago, and the Indicitus de Roma dynasty came to power with Rome at their back. Regardless, Rex Severian VI declined, as Avarignia was not looking to resume its place as the dog of Rome. Rome looked elsewhere, and those with lesser pride in Samogitia and Norland aligned themselves with Rome, as they feared Mongolistan and Denmark respectively. A note must be made here regarding the name of the Mongol Empire. Ever since their annexation of Persian territory, the Mongols had adopted much Persian culture over the years, including naming conventions, hence the name Mongolistan. Meanwhile, later that month, desiring greater access to Indian Ocean trade, Phrygia declared war upon the troublesome Tustarids, which had denied them such a luxury for generations now. To the east, Emperor Bhimsen Gorkha of Rajasthan, having completed his conquest of the subcontinent, invaded the relatively weak neighbor of Mongquang. Queen Jiaoyuan of Tianshui, wishing to deny the heretical Mandians further gains, also invaded Mongquang. In 1454, Zhang Yi was partitioned by Urad, Laizhou, and Tianshui, while the Buddhist Ayutthaya began to challenge Christian Nam Ning in the south. In 1455, Avarignia forged alliances with King Bertrand de Lavulon of Triballia and Kral Poznan Eltz of Sirtia, forming a powerful Mediterranean league which could resist the power of Rome, which began to reach out its grasping tendrils yet again. This soon led to a royal marriage between Princeps Severian and a Serdian Kralina, Aluvela. Another royal marriage with Triballia soon followed, cementing the loyalty of these kingdoms to one another. By 1456, Mangkuang proved itself worthy to withstand the onslaught of its neighbors, while Poyang to the east was now beneath the oppressive gaze of history, as Shaojin and Laizhou joined forces against it. That same year, Avarignia began to foster a network of spies and informants in Avarignia, hoping to feed such information to their ally Triballia. Beginning in 1458, the Avarignian monarchy began to centralize power in the hands of the Rex, moving away from the more decentralized feudal system which had sustained them since their departure from Rome. Back east, Tongren was next on the chopping block, being invaded by Namning and Tianshui for the crime of being weak. Queen Jiaoyuan of Tianshui had recognized the precarious position her country was in, and had since sought out a policy of conquest against her neighbors, which was now bearing fruit. Meanwhile, Poyang had held its own, and King Zhangji of Poyang focused on building a great fleet with which to explore the world and reap its riches. Admiral Longwei was sent abroad in this regard to further explore the Pacific Ocean, in which capacity he would eventually die, struck by a poison arrow. In 1463, Rex Severian VI completed the construction of a grand palace in Gibraltar, and in a fit of petty rage, King Abbas Sadi of Zamor sent him a box full of camel tongues. Rex Severian had the emissaries which brought him such a disgusting delivery seized and thrown down a mountain face. It was with this escalation that war broke out between Avarignia and Zamor. Triballia and Serdia did not join, as Avarignia did not ask, seeing that this was a local squabble. The Zamori capital of Tangiers lay directly over the Strait of Hercules, making it simple work for 14,000 Avarignian warriors to sail over and decimate it in short order. Shockingly, however, the Zamori had also had a visit from distant Poyang, and were gifted the knowledge of rigging in exchange for slaves, which they used to make a great deal of highly competent ships, which they now use to blockade Avarignia's Mediterranean coast. At the Battle of Almeria, 26 Avarignian vessels engaged 24 Zamori ones, only just emerging victorious, with a single ship to spare for the crossing to Zamor. The Battle of Sebta was an easier affair, with a force of 26,000 Avarignians overcoming the 22,000 Zamori slavers and their mercenaries. The Avarignian navy then carried out their own blockade against Zamor. By researching such ships, Avarignian shipwrights began to reverse engineer them and make their own. Severian VI was a great patron of this endeavor, utilizing it to overcome the Zamori. In 1468, Rex Severian VII and Nicetas de Roma ascended to the throne and continued his father's war. After the fall of Tangiers, it was slow going occupying desert towns, but the prior Rex had managed the war rather well, all things considered, and war enthusiasm remained high. It was such that, in 1471, Avarignia extracted a devastating peace from Zamor, annexing their capital, outlying regions, and islands, these being the Canaries and Azores. These acquisitions, when paired with the new shipping technology indirectly made available by Chinese explorers through Zamor, enabled an Avarignian explorer named Galindo de Lerin to settle the uninhabited islands of Cape Verde. Rightly, this could perhaps be called not only Avarignia's first colony, but the world's. Speaking of colonialism, the colonial race truly began in June of 1472, when Li Zhou colonized Taiwan, and Poyang, affronted at this foreign colony on their doorstep, began to colonize the Philippines. This also proved a time of innovation, as the kingdom of Shaojin went on a spree of inventions, creating alcohol-suspended perfumes, paper beading for smoother paper, and a kind of wood treatment for the hulls of large seagoing vessels. Back in Avarignia, in 1479, Rex Alfonso and Nicetas de Roma ascended to the throne. By 1494, the great eastern powers had colonized most of the uninhabited islands of their immediate neighborhood, with Poyang colonizing Halavi, Cocos Island, Biltong, and of course Luzon in the Philippines, while Laizhou held Taiwan and Micronesia, and Shaojin modestly claimed Palau. There were still some islands left for the taking, but ultimately things were getting too crowded, and they would soon have to look elsewhere. It was also in this year that the Kozuke shogunate was overthrown, and the Japanese Empire was re-established under Emperor Motohito Kanin. This new Japan would begin to absorb developments from the mainland in the interests of protecting itself from them. Then, in 1500, the entire world changed. A lonely vessel, battered by the waves and manned by criminals calling itself the Luren, was headed by a captain which had put down a mutiny while at sea, a man named Wei Ji. It was on the 6th of June 1500 that he was prepared to die, but saw a distant coastline which grew ever larger and more magnificent the closer he drew towards it. When the ship sank anchor before a sandy beach and a cliff crowned in lush green woodland, he immediately set up camp and claimed it for Poyang. They found bizarre, half-naked savages to their south who called the land they found Pomo. And so the colony of Pomo was established, but not on the northern coast of Africa as he had assumed. Rather, Pomo stood as the first colony of the New World, on the western coast of an as-yet unknown continent. And little did he know that several other voyages would be made, completely independent of him, by complete happenstance over the next few years. In 1501, Xiaojin found that same coast, but much further north, establishing New Chanolth in the continent's Pacific Northwest. In 1503, Nam Ning colonized Pastos on another unknown continent, a southern neighbor to the first. In 1505, Gai Zhou settled the Galapagos Islands, unsure if there was anything to gain from voyaging beyond Paradise. In 1507, Lai Zhou colonized Coquimbo in the far south. And finally, in 1510, unbeknownst to all other comers, a primitive bark known as the Kapu, just sturdy enough for this journey across the sea, landed on the Isle of Barbados, as its captain, Clanthi de Pravia, claimed it for Avarignia, planting that ancient flag deep in the soil of this new land.